Welcome again. We've got a nice presentation tonight.
Yeah.
I'll get started. Don't forget, your membership includes a swarm list, which has been crazy this last month. I'll show you some photos. Bee buddy program. Bee days at the apiary, 2 days this month, 2 days next month. A library, Kate can tell you about lots of books, and she's been cataloging them on Instagram. And equipment rental, extractors, refractometer,
We don't see.
we have a
Is that okay?
microscope. Observation hive and a frame jig, all for $25. I mean, for the swarm list, it's worth it.
1 second. Damn.
Apiary days, May 17th and May 30th. Is it Gather and Blather? That's a really nice event. Lots of people who don't come here come to that, and it's a nice conversation. And games if you want to. And then Wednesday, June 3rd is an Oregon honey judge coming to speak.
So what's that about?
I don't know, Brian?
Well, if you're wanna ever meet one of the pioneers and one of the real important people in Oregon beekeeping, it's Margie Ellis. And she's been the judge at the Oregon State Fair for a year. She's a remarkable lady, getting older, and it's gonna be a real treasure to have her here. And she's got a wealth of knowledge. Her husband was one of the largest beekeepers, commercial beekeepers, and really involved in the OSBA, Oregon State Beekeepers. I mean, and her daughter is, we got it right name now.
Honey King.
Honey King. And if you ever affiliated with the Oregon State Fair, she's one of the people that keeps it going. So they're coming next time, and it's gonna be a real treasure to have one of the true giants in Oregon honey here. I've tried for years to get her here, and Bonnie's gonna bring her. She's probably gonna forget a few things, and Bonnie will help her, but it's gonna be really special. I'm looking forward to it, and I hope you all come.
Yeah, please, it's great to have great turnout here in person and on Zoom. Next slide.
That is the end of the slides.
That is.
It's not forwarding.
I had a bunch of pictures of swarms from the swarm list today. So we'll
Um,
skip, and I'll let,
oh, there we go. Didn't,
Oh.
okay. Keep,
sorry, learning apiary, okay.
yep, here we go.
The learning apiary, the time changed. So that's the important part about this slide. They're now meeting at 10 to noon. So they're meeting an hour earlier now that it's warmer out.
Great. Next one. This is activity from just this last month. We went through $300 in 3 days. I mean, there were 40, 50 swarms in a day. And then the best part is the next slide. Everyone is different. Like this guy got to take the barrel with it. So I had a conversation. People call and they're panicked or whatever. This one is a cutout, but you just lift the top off and the bees are in there. There's hundreds of these photos. Anyway, one more slide of that. Yeah. This one. Somebody's, they're free. They cost you $200 if you had to buy them and stuff. Super fun. A lot of cutouts though, for some reason. people-
Yeah.
And then that's very hard to chase down, and ultimately you don't do them. There's 5 guys who do that commercial cutouts, so.
I had a neighbor, Susie pointed me to one of my neighbors had an issue. I thought I just saw, oh, there you are. And we don't know if they were just scouting, if they were going back and forth, but I had her put a speaker of music against the inside wall just to like make it really uncomfortable, or turning on fans, just like trying to like drive them out, just trying to get creative. Because no, it was one of my neighbors.
you can get them to not go in the structure.
Yeah, at least, and then make it so they're like, I don't want to be here.
Okay, that's it for my slides.
Whoop.
Whoop. And I'll let Flora, introduce herself.
Sure.
Here.
Do we gonna do his slides first though?
I thought we put the after, Flora. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Leave him, we'll give you a flag at the end.
Okay.
All right. If you're on Zoom, hang on. We're gonna swap laps.
And if we could leave questions till the end.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Stop sharing probably. All right.
Oh, the view. Okay.
And maybe I need to make you host.
Oh, yeah, maybe. I'm not seeing my meeting picture. Oh, they're hidden.
Yeah. Oh, if you want to follow the librarian, that's me, it's librarian beekeeper on Instagram. The books are on there. Yep.
There we go. Oh, it's not up. Weird. Sometimes that happens. Oh, shoot. Let me see. Huh.
You went to a second screen.
Maybe, let's see. I'll stop share. See,
That's here. It's funny, it's like here, but it's not.
that is very odd.
Oh.
Let me see.
Yeah.
I mean,
Sometimes.
let me just go to that screen and see if I can pull it up there.
Oh, maybe I have. Yeah.
No?
Yeah, I was trying to like.
I feel like this happened last time too, for some reason. Let's see if I pull this up and it'll do.
Right. Takes a little.
Huh. Okay, let me just see one more thing. So let's say share. Let's do screens. Share sound side by side as background content only. I don't understand why that.
Oh, through actually screen.
So bizarre. I don't understand.
Yeah, she's the.
Okay, yeah.
But that was what I did.
Okay, that is weird.
I'm like, this ain't my first rodeo. Like, it's not working. Oh, maybe that is a good move.
I would just.
We can't though. Oh, you might be able to. Could you? But then no, the whole point is to get it up on there. So that's the.
Right, so we would just. Use yours full screen on the presentation.
Actually, no, let's see. Let me try this one more time. I don't think that would work anyway. So let's see this. I'm gonna go back to my screen. Go there. Have that. Pull that up.
So. Mostly because I don't use the data.
I think maybe because of the Zoom, it won't. Oh, there we go.
Whatever you did.
I don't know what I did, but it worked. And that's all that matters. But
can you share your screen?
yeah, let me get still.
Your laptop's catching.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
And
Okay.
are you able to share that screen with the Zoom?
Let's see. Okay. Um, Hey.
Yeah, that worked.
Okay. Yeah, it should work, right?
I had a feeling that I'm like.
Okay.
Is that working?
Like I see.
Well, it shows both.
Okay.
But try not to get the worst side of me. I've done these before. I look back at the recording, it's like my butt just from the side, and I'm like,
Just that.
didn't sign up for that. All right. Well, I just wanted to thank you all first for coming out today. I know everybody is so busy this time of year and we've all got so much going on and it's just like the end of the day. We just want to collapse into bed and that's how I feel. But it's just such a joy to be here and get to present this class. This is actually the maiden journey of this class. I have never presented this one and I just love this group so much. You always make me so comfortable here and you're always so into everything that I'm sharing that I always like to bring my new stuff to you guys first. And so tonight I'll be sharing this with you and then tomorrow I'll be sharing it with the Humboldt County beekeepers. And then week after next, I'll be sharing it with Lane County beekeepers. So you are the first to see this and I love feedback. So if you do have any, I would love to hear it. As well, you can always contact me anyway. Oh, I had a few little things. Oh, right there. Yeah. Thank you. So, basically, I am Flora Molyneaux and I am a non-migratory bioregional beekeeper, which means that I don't chase nectar. I don't take my hives to different agricultural crops. My hives stay where they are the whole season long, and I take advantage of the different seasons and the biodiversity of the area in which my hives reside. I sell at the farmers market at Eugene at the Lane County Farmers Markets. And and I also have a number of different programs. My big claim to fame for this season is I had my biggest ever honey harvest this last year. I got almost between 1,800 and 2,000 pounds. I kind of lost count at the end. It was just, there was so much going on. And that was really the achievement for that was, it's, I don't have any employees. I'm a one-woman show, but the real achievement for that for me was that was only on about 20 hives. And I've done about 13, 14, I think 1,500 pounds was about the most I'd done before that. And that was on 40 hives. So I really learned a lot. And what I've really come to share and want to really kind of celebrate with everyone here is the idea that you can do a lot with a little. And that's really what tonight's presentation is about, is giving you guys the tips and tricks on how I was able to produce that much. And really for me now, it's really about quality, not quantity. That's really how you get really good hives that are just doing the most, and being a really good collaborator is our job. And that's what I'm excited to share about with you all. But I also had some other cool achievements this last year. I'm the 2025 recipient for the North American Pollinator Partnership campaign, and I won the Farmer Rancher Award for the United States. So that's pretty exciting. Yes. It's a international award, and it was just such a cool experience to be among such amazing people who are doing such great stuff all over the world with pollinators. And I started out as a native bee enthusiast before I even got into honeybees. And so it's just super cool that all the different projects and stuff I'm been volunteering and doing all these years are coming forward and being noticed. My farm is Wild Everlasting Farm. And to give you kind of an idea about the things that I'm doing, our mission statement is 30 acres devoted to exploring the relationship between people, plants, and pollinators. And the way that we're doing that right now is that I have 40 hives and I produced about 1,800 pounds of honey. I grow specialty forage plants for bees. So that's a big part of the magic is cover cropping and different medicinal herbs and things. I also have 15 mentoring clients, so people that I go to their apiaries once a month and I help them with their bees. I also run 2 school beekeeping programs. I have second graders that I work with once a week and also a high school group that I've been working with the past couple years. We just had our queen come back mated. She's our 3rd in the lineage, so I feel like a grandmother now. But it's been so beautiful to watch them go through all the process. And this year I have an all-boy crew, and normally they're just like cracking jokes and being wild and goofballing out. And you should have seen them going through that hive waiting to see. We call it Princess Day when we look for our new queen and see if she's all mated. And it was like, we didn't find her. We looked a couple days early because they couldn't wait. And where it's like finally on the last 2 frames, you could have heard a pin drop. They were silent. And we see this little tiny patch of eggs. And she was on the very last frame, all plump and mated. And they were like freaking out, like high-fiving, hugging each other. Like it was like a whole thing. And so it just reminds me how magical all this is and how we are just like of the very few of the whole entire planet of people who get to experience this like incredible skill set and just the beauty of what honeybees can do. And it's really all about that human honeybee connection, and we all feel it or we wouldn't be here. So I've got that going on. My other big project right now that I'm super stoked on is we have a farm project that is happening out in Eugene, and it's a farm work program for people who are experiencing homelessness. And they have a bunch of year-round residents, and then they do bees, microgreens, chickens, and a bunch of other stuff. The residents work those projects, and I'm running the beekeeping program there. And last year I was doing a lot of volunteering, and we produced several hundred pounds of honey, and they got to, take some home, feed everybody, and sell a little too. And so this year they hired me on a weekly basis. And so I'm going there, and we have 6 hives, and we are already up getting ready to put supers on tomorrow. So it's pretty exciting, and it's early to get them supers on. So I'm super excited about that. I'm also the educational coordinator at the Lane County Beekeepers. I've been on the board there for almost 10 years now. And I'm the regional representative for the South Willamette Valley for the Oregon State Beekeepers. So that's kind of my little roster. This is Wild Everlasting. You can see my meadow foam cover crop in the front and all my different hives out there. And it's just such a joy for me to do this stuff. And I really have a lot of business, kind of ideas and stuff, but I have a much bigger idea, which is sort of my legacy on the planet and what I want to do for the other people out there. And really, I want to help other beekeepers. And so it's just like my joy to teach and share all my little tips and tricks and what I'm learning. And a lot of this today is really about optimizing honey production, but the way that we optimize honey production is to be active collaborators with our hive. And number one is essentially to put off swarming. So I know a lot of people aren't that worried if their hive swarms, and it's really not the end of the world. But in this particular presentation, it's about optimizing for honey production. And if you want the mass amount of honey, you really can't let them swarm. So we're going to talk a lot about how not to have your hive swarms and all kinds of little tips and techniques that I use. And really a lot of this came out of the fact that when I was learning to keep bees, I kept asking everybody, they'd say, do this when and do that then. And I'd be like, why? And no one could ever tell me why. And so this has been my teaching is oftentimes to give people the why, because my brain just can't compute unless I know why. So hopefully this will help you learn a lot of that. And we have to start out with our beekeeping wheel of the year. I'm really known for this. I've brought this forward as kind of my thing. I use it with all my students and in all my classes. It's a calendar that's basically made after the ancient agricultural calendars that are cross-cultural all over the world, from the medicine wheel of the native peoples to the Celtic wheel of the year to all over the world. There is these wheels of the year, and generally they're all agricultural related to teach people the different times to harvest and plant and sow seeds and all that kind of stuff. And it works wonderfully for teaching beekeeping because beekeeping is a cycle. It's not a square calendar that goes like this and gets done at the end. And so I wanted you to see this, how we're going through these cycles. So for beekeeping, all beekeeping in the Northern Hemisphere, although the closer you are to the equator, this changes a little bit in terms of it lengthens the season or shortens the season. But where we're at, we're kind of like, you know, because of where we're at in the longitude, latitude, we're really dead set on this. This really is like right where we're at in terms of what our season looks like. And for most of us, all beekeeping begins in March 21st in spring equinox. And I want to just premise this with, this is very much for non-migratory beekeepers. If you're a commercial beekeeper, you guys remember the surfing movie Endless Summer? That's those guys, okay? They don't ever have a winter. They have 1 month of winter and then they take their bees to California. They set their hives up completely different. They would never think of letting their hives backfill an entire box of honey to overwinter for a single month because they need the brood. So this is not like for people who are doing commercial beekeeping or migratory beekeeping. This is specifically for people who don't move their hives. And we generally, the earliest time we're really opening our hives is right around spring equinox. And then the time that we pretty much shut our hives for the year and we don't go back into them is fall equinox. So you can see where the bees are, that's just half of the year. That's the length of our entire season. And that season is broken up into 2 equal parts. You have from spring equinox to summer solstice. That's the increase time of the year. And the increase phase has a number of characteristics, and it's all pushed by the sun. As the sun gets closer and warms the earth, the seeds sprout and the plants bloom and produce nectar and pollen. And during this time, our brood is going to get built up. The queen is going to start laying more. The bees are going to fly out and replenish their stores. And then the nurse bees that are born, that first generation that is born, they're going to start drawing wax. And this is really important because wax is a part of the body of the superorganism. All the maturation of the hive has to do with how much wax they have. So when you go and you buy a package bees and you put them in a little hive box that has all naked frames, that's like taking a little NICU baby and putting it in a little breathing machine, and you're just feeding it and trying to get it to go because it doesn't even have a body yet or any of the ways that it can function and carry out all of the things it needs to do to live. So it needs a lot of careful care. Right? You have a little 5-frame nuke and you put them in a hive, you have a little bit better of a body. You've got a little, little baby that can do a few little things, right? They can sit up, they can laugh, they can smile, but they can't take care of themselves. They still need food and tending. But it's these overwintered hives, right? That is the mature, blossoming teenager that's out there, won't let mom tell them what to do, right? That's what we're talking about because they have all the comb and they can do all the things that the body needs to do. And because comb is so important, it's really important that you're aware of the fact that they really only make comb during the increased time of year. So if you're putting frames on during the decreased time of year that are naked, they're not really going to be able to do much with them. So we really need to be aware of those kinds of things. So the advice we're giving in the increased time of year, the opposite is true in the decreased time of year. So this is what makes beekeeping so confusing because you're asking for help and someone says, oh, well, we put another box on when 7 of the 10 frames are filled. But that's only true in the increased time of year, because if you put a box on with naked frames in the decreased time of year, essentially they're not going to draw any comb or anything on it. And that's because the queen's laying less during the decreased time of year. Brood rearing decreases, wax production halts, and the colony starts to consolidate back down into the bottom box. And as it does so, it backfills the top box of honey. And that's what you want. And we pretty much have to pull our supers off by the first week of August. And there's 2 reasons why that are very important. The first reason why is at that point, Our hives are basically, I don't care who you are, where you are, your hives are infested with mites by that point. Because the mites are breeding under the brood caps, your hive has been pumping out brood all those months. And by the time August 1st rolls around, the mite levels in the hive are extremely high. Alongside those mite levels are also lots and lots of pathogens and viruses that they carry in vector. So those are major things that our hives have to contend to, and they get to an extremely high level at that point. So we need to get those supers off and start our mite treatments no later than the end of the first week of August. And I've done tests like this. I've written on the dates on the top of my hives of when treatment began. And the hives that I left honey on too long for, they always are the ones that end up losing over winter or having problems with, because they definitely just had too much exposure. And part of the reason why is because this really important thing happens basically sometime around the beginning of September. We generally know this happens because the leaves start to turn colors in fall. That same phenomenon in nature of the cold nights making the leaves turn does something to our bees as well. And that is creates a thing where the bees are born during September, are born with an extra fat body called vitiligen. And vitiligen is the thing that allows them to live all the rest of the year. So summer bees, bees that are born in summer, they're only living about 6 to 7 weeks. That's the length of their lifespan. Then we get the fat bees that are born in the early September, end of August, depending on when those cold nights arrive. Those bees live 6 to 7 months. It's this vitiligen that extends their life through the winter. And if your mites and your virus levels are really high during that time, it's going to damage those fat bees. And because the population is static at that point, it doesn't grow or anything, your hive doesn't overwinter because your hive is too damaged. Those bees are too damaged and they can't overwinter your hive. So we're up against a big deadline. There's a lot going on. And what I'm teaching you today is mostly concerned with the front part of the year, is in our increased time of year. And this is the time, if you want honey, you have to make maneuvers. And you've probably heard me say this before when I've come, you only get out of beekeeping what you put into it. So essentially, anybody who wants a good honey harvest knows they got to be on it in the increased time. We are making weekly inspections. Once a week, I have to go into my hives and I have to make maneuvers. Even today, before I left today, part of me, I was so tired. I got in really late last night because I've been working like 12-hour days, and I had an apiary in town I did not want to go to today before I came here. I was so tired, and I knew if I didn't go down there today and work those hives, then when I got back next week, they'd all be swarmed, and I would not have what all this work I've been doing would be for nothing. So you have to go in there and make little maneuvers so that you can ensure you're going to get what you want out of it. So this is the lens that we're looking through all of this through. And this is basically the same thing. And you've probably seen me show this before, but essentially we start our season off with our hives looking like this. All the brood is up at the top, or all the whole colony is up at the top, and the bottom box is empty. And the very first job that we do is we reverse the boxes, and we put the brood at the bottom and we put the empty box on top. That first manipulation is the first manipulation you do to ensure that you're going to get a honey crop. So it starts early then when you make these moves. If you wait too long and they've straddled the box and they're between the two boxes, you've already put yourself into a pickle here, because when they straddle the boxes like that, which means they're moving down without you twisting them over or reversing them over, they backfill a lot and they make all the nectar that's coming in, they put around them and they sort of cap off the top. And then when you go to move around, when you start to do these manipulations I'm going to discuss, you really don't have the ability to move them around quite as much, because they'll have a big crest of honey that you can't kind of change at that point, or there's pollen put into areas. So you got to get in there early enough to reverse those hives. Then from spring equinox to summer solstice, essentially the queen's gonna lay in bigger and bigger concentric circles until she has this big old massive brood nest that goes through your whole brood configuration. Maybe it's 2 deeps or maybe it's 3 mediums. It doesn't really matter. It's the same amount of space. But at the end of the day, if you don't get a big old brood nest like that, you're not going to get a big honey harvest, because they can only make honey in relationship to the size and the strength of the brood nest. And so if you have a little tiny brood nest like the spring equinox hive, that's exactly what you can make, is one box on top. But they need that for overwinter, so you can't take that. My whole thing is I made almost 2,000 pounds of honey, and my hives went into winter with 80 pounds of honey each. So this is what we're trying to do, is give them all they need to overwinter and have so much extra for us. And the way you do that are these big old fat brood nests. So you have to make some choices in your beekeeping alongside this, and we're going to talk about those choices. But just to be aware, the goal of honey production is to have peak population occur alongside the nectar flows. And just to give you an idea, some of you probably don't have supers on yet, but just to say, for anybody can produce a blackberry crop. That's just like bees better be making a blackberry crop, okay? Because if they're not making a blackberry crop, they're not doing well, all right? And production does have to do with how healthy and vibrant the hive is, because dead bees don't make honey and sick bees don't either. And so if your hive isn't doing well enough to make honey, that's something you need to look at, because that's not good. And what most beekeepers who have a little finesse in wanting to make honey, they want spring honey. Okay. So I can make honey at blackberry time, no problem. But I need to get my hives big enough and healthy enough to come out of winter so strong that I've got supers on by the time the maple flows. And that's where you get that good spring honey that everybody that can produce it is known for. I've got people coming to my booth right now buying cases of it because they just want it before it runs out. It's like the champagne of honey. And that's like the goal, is you could make the same, you think that you only make one type of honey, but you make one type of honey because you can only get your hive big enough one time a year. You can make multiple types of honey with every single flow that happens here if you have your hive big and strong enough. But if your hive isn't strong enough, they're just basically feeding themselves. They don't have any ability to catch honey for other people, so this is kind of the tips and tricks that I'm going to give you. So again, I talked about that first manipulation, which is, of course, they start out and you've got the whole colony in the top box. They've eaten all the honey that you left on top in the winter. The whole colony is up on top and the bottom box is empty. Now, generally, I'd say probably in Portland urban situation, this is going to be earlier for you because you have a lot of landscaping trees around here that bloom early. Where I live out in the country, I'm not getting those blooms early. It's not until the native trees and stuff start blooming. So you kind of might have to get on it early. I would say start checking your hives on warm days earlier in March and see what's going on in there, and make your reversal before they've started to move down. So you get a clear, open, full box. During that time, when you're making that first manipulation, you want to do a few things. You want to first reverse the brood boxes. And when you do that, you need to remove excess honey, because surely they probably haven't eaten every drop. If they've eaten every drop in the top box that they're in, so they're all up here in the top box, if they've eaten all the honey in the top box, they're starving. So you need to start feeding them immediately. But generally, if they haven't and they've been resourceful, there'll be extra honey in there. And you can't leave that capped honey going into spring. Bees don't eat honey. They eat fresh nectar. I like to give the analogies of the canned peaches or the fresh peaches. If you have an opportunity to eat peaches and you have fresh peaches and canned peaches, you're going to go for the fresh peaches, right? That's how bees feel about honey. If they have to eat honey, they will on a cold day or days they can't fly out. But if there is fresh nectar, you better believe they're going to go after the fresh nectar. They want the fresh nectar, and it's much easier for them to brood up and feed all those little baby broods on nectar than it is honey. In fact, honey, if they brood up on honey or have to feed the babies too much honey, they get what they call ash content, which is actually like, Dewey could probably tell you more about it, but it's basically, it messes up their digestion. And so they really need that good nectar. Now, if they can't get nectar, or even if they can, it's a good idea to feed them during this time, because actually pure white sugar syrup, as much as it sounds weird, we can't anthropomorphize them. They are sugar bugs. That's what they want. They're not little people who can't live off white sugar and sugar's bad. And I understand the pain, because every time I go buy that 50-pound bag of white sugar at the cash and carry, I have to explain to the grocer that it's not me using the white sugar, it's the bees. But still, that is what they like, and that is the closest thing just to their nectar. And that's a healthy move for you as a beekeeper, to build them back up after the season. And so essentially what you're going to do is you're going to remove that excess honey in the top box and basically leave them, depending on how far you're in the season. When you first go in, I might leave 2 frames on either side of honey, but the warmer it gets and the more nectar that's available, I reduce it all the way down to where there's no capped honey in the hive whatsoever, and there's just frames of nectar and pollen, 1 frame of food on each side of each box. So 2 frames of food in each box. So if you leave that capped honey in there, all it's going to do is gob up the brood nest and make less room for the queen to lay, and make your hive more swarmy later on. The other thing that you can do is, of course, remove excess pollen. We live in the Willamette Valley area. We have no shortage of pollen ever. In fact, the opposite is true. Our bees will constantly pollen pack our boxes to death, to the point where they're always swarmy and they're always having problems, because essentially pollen is sort of like, it's like a brick road. You can't change it. You can't take it out. You can't do anything. Once they put pollen in there, it's over. That cell's gone. And until they eat it out or remove it, it just makes a cell that's taken up space, and there's nothing that can happen there. No brood can be laid in it. Nothing can happen until they eat every bit of pollen in there. So they don't need more than a certain amount of pollen in the entire hive. They need room for laying, not excess pollen. So again, going down to essentially 2 frames of food on each side, a frame of honey and a frame of pollen on each side of each box. So 4 total, 8 total frames in the whole configuration. That's all you need. And then again, as you get warms up, you go to 1 on each side. And you'll see that here in a minute. But the other thing I want to really bring up is culling old black comb. I was telling Brian here at dinner that I've been working really hard with the brood disease classes at WSU, really trying to cull my comb that is just old and unfunctional. And something I heard that's so important is to think about, we're literally tending this creature, this superorganism that can regenerate its body, its bones, its body. Can you imagine if we could just regenerate ourselves? Why in the heck are we expecting this creature to do well on some old broken bones when it can absolutely regenerate itself? It's because we're afraid that we won't get enough honey, or we won't get this, or we won't get that. We need that comb. Well, at a certain point, that comb is harming you, not helping you. This is a wonderful chance for you to cull out that comb. So all the old comb, just start to get that old yucky comb in the bottom box through this season. And then when you go to reverse the boxes, pull out all that old yucky comb and put in fresh frames or nice strong comb, and then reverse the nice stuff on top instead, or maybe the naked frames on top, because they're drawing wax in the next couple months. But don't make them limp along on this unhealthy body that's holding all this background residues and bad virus in the hive. And then again, help them feed and recover from all that they've had to go through with 1-to-1 sugar syrup. And all of this is basically about brood congestion. And brood congestion happens a number of ways. When I remember when I was a new beekeeper, I always thought my hive was swarming. And I guess this year that's probably true. But I will say that I didn't really understand the sort of underlying things that had to do with what caused swarming. Now, yes, it is true that when the weather is right and the nectar is coming in, that swarming will happen. But a lot of it is mostly about brood congestion. Now, if you have excess capped honey and pollen, that's going to contribute majorly to brood congestion. So the last slide really illuminated how you need to start out by taking that excess stuff out when you begin the season. But the other thing that is true is that the pheromones play a big part in this. When you get all those bricks of, we call it when she's laying bricks and she's a brick house, then basically that creates a situation where there is a dilution of the queen pheromone because there's not as much open brood. And you can see that in the bee math, right? Because it's the worker bees are in the magic numbers 3, 6, and 12. So the number just doubles. And then they're 21 days for their whole, gestation life cycle period. So their egg for 3 days, then 6 days for the larva, and then 12 days for the cap brood. So the amount of days that they're in the cap stage is longer than they're in open brood. So at a certain point in swarm season, the scales tip towards capped brood, and there's more capped brood than there's open brood. And you're probably starting to see that in your hives now. Now, when that happens, it dissipates the queen pheromone. It also dissipates the footprint pheromone. The queen is leaving little smells around on her feet as she runs around the hive and lays. And really what happens is as she starts to get physically restricted to the middle of the frames because there's so many bees in there, essentially she doesn't get her little footprint pheromone on the bottoms of the frames. And that's why you always see the queen cups on the sides and the bottom of the frames, because there's no smell down there, and that cues the worker bees to start making those queen cups. So when you keep saying, why is she trying to swarm? There's not even this going on, that going on. Well, maybe she's got brood congestion in this little area and she's not walking down there and getting that pheromone imprint. Maybe there isn't good airflow, which is another big part of it, is if you've got all kinds of weird comb going on in there and you've got all kinds of excess honey and nectar and you've got drones where they build the drones in between the two hives and you're letting those hang out and you're not going to the bottom box and scraping those drones off and opening up the little burr combs and stuff that are happening, you're creating poor circulation within the hive, and that is contributing to swarming. I have taken swarm pressure off just by scraping all the excess comb out of the hive. And then an old commercial beekeeping trick is to let the ventilation pop the top, they say, and you basically can go in there and either pull your bottom off your screen bottom board for sure, and then stick a little stick in between the top super and the top brood box, and that lets the air flow out. So that smell of all the cap brood doesn't create swarming and bottleneck the swarming instinct. Because you can have a lot of brood. I run my hives and you'll see brood all the way across in 1 frame of honey and 2 frames of honey in each box. And there is just solid brood brick house all the way, and they don't swarm because I'm doing this. And that's what you kind of need to get going on. It's like putting a pot to boil. You want it to simmer and stay simmering and stay bubbling, but you don't want it to overflow, because if you overflow, you lose all your pressure and you start over again, right? So that's what happens when the hive swarms. You let all the pressure off, and then they don't pack up all those supers. And I mean, I had hives that had 7 supers on top. And I'm just saying, this is possible. But you do have to also have a young, energetic queen. And I will say a lot of us let those queens hang around for way too long. It's okay to do that. We all love our queens, but don't bet the farm on an older queen that's slowing down. Take her out, put her in a resource nuke, requeen the hive, or let it requeen itself, but don't try to expect some queen that has laid too many eggs to build this. It's not going to happen. She's going to throw problem after problem, and it's just related to the age of the queen, not anything with the hive. So then we're going to hit peak spring, and that's where we're at. Beltane or May Day, those are peak spring days, right? The peak of spring. And this is when we really get heavy into the swarm prevention, because by this time we should have a full block of bees on both of our full configuration should be all brood all the way out. And then we have to make our decision. We got to choose our own adventure, okay? Now, there's a couple ways we can go with this. And I always like to meet my students wherever they are. There's nothing you can do to disappoint me as a teacher. I'm going to wave you in the water wherever you're at and meet you right there. And that's what we do in beekeeping. We can't all make 2,000 pounds of honey. That's okay. But we want you to have your goals met. And we can do that a number of different ways. That's what's so cool about beekeeping is there's all these diverse ways to end up at our goal. So when our hives look like this and they are just filled with brood all the way, they are either going to swarm or we have to choose our adventure as a collaborator. Now, if you're a beginner, the best thing to do is make a split. And the reason why is, first off, you can always join those pieces back later, but you get to maintain your productive queen. The other reason is it buys you lots of time. The type of stuff I'm talking about, this weekly manipulation, I'm literally going through the entire hive frame by frame on every single hive I have once a week. So 40 hives of just my own, not to mention my own. I figured it out the other day. It's somewhere between 75 hives a week I have to go through every single frame to stop them from swarming. So you could do that, but if you don't have time for that, that's okay. You could also just make a split. And when you make a split, essentially you buy yourself like a month or two of not having to worry about them swarming. And during that time, they're going to build up again. They'll go all the way down to one box. They're going to build up to that second box. And by the time they're up to this again, where they look like this again, swarm season will be over and you won't have to worry about it. Your population will still be high enough to make a honey crop. You just won't get the spring honey. And that's what a lot of people don't want. That's why they do what we do, to make those varietals. So, and make more honey, right? Because I'm going to make a lot of crops of honey, not just one. And then the third manipulation or adventure is to Robin Hood. Maybe I don't want more hives or I can't have more hives. I can also go in there and steal from the rich and give to the poor. No reason to have one going, to the sky while the other one's sitting there barely getting by. You can go in there and take cat brood and off of the big rich ones and give it to the ones who need a little help. So that's another way to release the pressure without taking all the air out of the balloon. So let's see our decisions here. So here's our two main decisions, of course, is weekly manipulation. These are kind of the pros and cons. So with the weekly manipulation, it's time consuming and it requires keen observation skills. So you really got to go in there frame by frame and be like, okay, I'm playing Tetris. And that's what I've had friends watch me who didn't know about beekeeping. And they're like, whoa, it's like you're playing Tetris in each hive. And it literally is. It's like, okay, here's pollen, that goes in 1. Here's a nectar, that goes in 10. Okay, this one has a little bit more room to lay, that goes in the middle. Okay, this one's fully laid out and it's all open brood. I know that's going to turn into capped. I can't leave that in the middle because that's going to hold up the whole middle for the next foreseeable future. That goes to the side. Oh, look, this is a capped brood that's hatching and they're hatching right now. So this is going to be hatched in the next couple days. That can go in the middle because that's going to create more room for her. So I'm just playing the game in both boxes, making the Tetris puzzle work. So there's the most amount of laying room in the center frames of each box. And that is basically what we're doing. But it's time consuming and it takes good skills to be able to see what's on each frame. But the positive is that the bees capture that spring honey. And the forager population grows. So I can really get the forager population that is like balls to the walls is what we say. And it really is. It's just, you get a forager population that is like out. It's wild. It's wild. When you see a hive that it looks like this, you know what I'm talking about.
How long do you do those?
Until summer solstice. So it's a long time till summer. So once the blackberry flow comes in, that takes away the instinct for the bees to want to swarm. So we do it however long it takes until the blackberry flow comes in, essentially. And then the risky part is that even sometimes when I do everything right, I do my manipulations, I'm playing the game, I'm good at playing it, I do it exactly right how it is. Sometimes it doesn't work and they swarm anyway, especially a second-year queen. An older queen, she wants to swarm so bad, especially if I brought her through a whole season where I never let her swarm. That second season, she is just throwing them up every week and it can be risky. So that's one reason that I tell beginners it might not be the best move. Now, making a split is an artificial swarm, so it works well and it buys you lots of time. It gives you more hives and it maintains all your resources. So essentially, if you catch your swarms, you're kind of in the same position. You didn't make a split, but you caught a split, and you have all your resources. You have your old queen, you have all your bees, you have all the hive stuff. So you can actually let them be apart for a little while, get them past swarm season, and recombine them back. Or pull one queen and start a little split over here and make a big hive again when you need the population to be bigger. That's what's cool about it. You can separate and bring back together. But it does sometimes often create a loss of resources because during the time that it's queenless, they have no mouths to feed, and they tend to do pollen packing and honey bound stuff where they just put honey and nectar and everything and pollen and everything. So whatever gear you have them in tends to get all mucked up at kind of the wrong time. So then when you go back to put them back, you can't just put it all back together again. You kind of have to fine tooth it and reorchestrate it. So I will say it's not as easy as all that, but you still have maintain all your resources that can be used later. And then on making a split, it is risky in the sense that sometimes it can fail. Some splits don't work out and they do fail. The queen flies out to get maiden, she gets eaten by a bird. She doesn't come back. That happens. But what I will tell you is it's a hell of a lot less risky than weakly manipulation because honestly, they have thousands of years of evolutionary history to requeen themselves. And 9 times out of 10, I have great success with my splits and even with my students, helping them learn basic splits, which you guys should have me come back sometime and do my splits class. I have a bunch of really cool splits that I can teach. They're very simple. But what I find is generally we go in too early and we assume it hasn't worked when it really has. So as long as you set the split right, it should work. And on the other hand, you could do everything right there and it might not work. So again, it's risky, but not that risky. So let's go into our first choice for beginners. This is the artificial swarm. We're essentially taking each hive and we're splitting them and making 2 hives. There'll be a queenless side and a queen right side. And one of the advantages is it's easier to maintain your resources and less time consuming. When you've made your split and you've pulled them apart, that queen right side, you can feed them and build them back up quicker. So they're not as strong as they were where they were swarming, but they're not as far behind a hive that hasn't been split. So you'd be so surprised. I can build them up real quick if you feed them with 1-to-1 after. And you have drawn comb, essentially. Then the other thing that's good about the splits is it can create a brood break and reduce mite populations. You always, though, when you make a queen, no matter what style you use, please always move the queen off the original stand. Because if you leave the queen on the stand, you're really losing the chance to create that balance in your splits because the original location is its own whole benefit. And then you put the laying queen there, you've stacked all the odds at the original location. Now you've pulled off this split over here, doesn't have the original location where all the foragers are going to be, doesn't have the queen, and you're expecting a lot for it to generate. Generally, you're not going to get good queens that way. So again, take the queen off the original location. And some of the easiest ones that I know of is basically because all the foragers are going to go back to the original location. Even if you can't find your queen, move the entire hive. You can do it piece by piece. Move the entire hive to the new location. It can be 3 feet away or maybe more than 3 feet. So 4 feet away. It doesn't matter. And then at the original location, just move back a nuke. Move back. You don't need a whole big heifer there. You can move back a frame of food, 2 to 3 frames of brood, and with the bees clinging on them, and make sure just on each frame that you put back, you don't have the queen, and all the foragers go back there, and you are going to get such a good queen that way. I mean, chonker queens, and they don't need a lot of resources. So you've kept most of your resources, but enough to calm down the swarming on that hive. So that's a really good method. You really want to, though, like I said, they'll chunk in honey and pollen on that queenless side. So I always super a split that is queenless. So even if you don't, you're going to add the second brood box, you are, but you super it in the meantime so that they store all the honey and nectar that they're bringing in that they don't have to feed to the babies in that super. And then right before the queen is expected to be mated and come back, you add that second brood box under the super. And then they have a fresh, beautiful box of all hopefully drawn comb, but maybe it's naked. You'll have to see what you got. And then that queen has this whole box to lay in that isn't all mucked up with whatever they've put into it while you were queenless.
Putting a queen excluder.
No, I never use any queen excluders. Just know that most of this is not possible with queen excluders. In the beekeeping world, we call queen excluders honey excluders. And that's because it keeps congestion down in the brood boxes. The fear with a queen excluder is just that your queen is going to lay in your supers. I've almost had that happen maybe in 10 years, 2 times ever. As long as you have a lot of room down in your brood boxes, which you should be maintaining that room through careful inspections, there's no reason for a queen to ever lay in your supers. And if she does, it's really not that big of a deal. It's going to hatch and they're going to backfill it with honey. So who cares? But what will happen with the queen excluder is you are going to create congestion down below. And all this processes that we're talking about is going to be amplified by having that on top there. So I use queen excluders for some weird little methods, but none of this stuff. And I really tell all my students, don't use them. The risk is not worth the reward. But I know it's hard because everybody's been taught to use them. So I understand why. All right. Now, the more advanced option is that weekly swarm control. So this is what the boxes look like. So the yellow is nectar and the orange is pollen. And notice there's only 4 of 10 frames in each box. And hopefully as they get more swarmy and more swarmy, I go down to just 1 in each box because they don't need it. They're eating fresh nectar. Those are seriously just to feed the babies. They have plenty of food on each frame in there, right? They've got honey in the corners and pollen rainbows. They've got food in the box. They have 1 frame of honey or nectar on each side and 1 frame of pollen. And pollen is kind of that bookends of the brood nest. So if you come into the hive and you've got pollen, these orange frames are over here, and you have an orange frame over here, your brood nest is only that big because that is the bookends of the brood nest. So your first thing that you're going to do of manipulation is pop those pollens out because the pollen is holding them in. And that's another reason we don't need to use the queen excluder is because the queen doesn't like to walk over the pollen bands. And so when you have those in like that, she's just going to lay in the little space between the 2 pollen frames because she doesn't like to walk over here and lay a bunch over here on the other side of the pollen. Sometimes she will, but she doesn't like to. So what you'll see is just tons of energy of her just staying in that little area between the 2 bookends of the pollen. So that's the first thing we do is pop the pollen.
So we're running 8 frames, so you still do.
1 in 8. Now, 8 frames is even harder in this situation. 8 frames are really designed, they're much lighter, but they were really designed for commercial beekeepers who didn't want honey storage because they don't get paid for honey, they get paid for brood. So you have to be very careful with 8 frames because they build up really quick and they get congested really quick. So, but yes, 1 in 8. So, and then the ultimate rule holds true here that we add an extra box or we place a super when 7 of the 10 frames in the top box have bees. Now, it's a good idea if you're on just your brood configuration now, go ahead and if they're only on 5 of the 10 frames, you can add your super a little early because they need somewhere to store and start working on that nectar. And you don't want it to be down in your brood boxes. That's the first way that they're going to clog up everything. And what happens is they start to cap off and backfill the top of the brood nest early. And we want them to do it in the decreased time of year after we've pulled our supers, not before, because as soon as they get a ton of honey, not only will they swarm in there, they quit foraging, they cap off the nest and they're just like, okay, we're good. We got what we need. That is not a collaboration. We're asking for a collaboration. So you can throw your super on a little bit early so they have somewhere to start storing, or let's say it's all naked frames, they can start drawing on those frames early. And then the real kind of test here and the main kind of manipulation here is to keep the center 3 frames open for the queen to lay in both brood boxes by consistently rotating hatched open frames to the center. And then like now, what I did today, I've already got that. I've already done that so many times. I've got just a brick of like all brood, cat brood. So I go in there and I Robin Hood now, and I take 1 or 2 frames of cat brood, give it to weaker hives building up swarms or nukes or whatever, and then take a full-on naked frame and shove it right down in the middle of the brood nest. And that will slow down that simmering. And then okay, so and then this is what it should look like. And see these ones that are darkened in the middle here? Those, especially in the top box, those are the most important frames. That's why in the commercial industry, they come and they just crack the boxes. They don't want to lift each box off because they have so many. They crack the top box and they look under and they look for queen cells in the top box. Because 9 times out of 10, if a hive is going to swarm, there's going to be cells in the top box. And then if there's a bunch of queen cells in there, then you go through and inspect everything else. So even if you're like just getting used to all this and you're trying this out, if you pay the most attention to the 4 middle frames in the top box, that there's always room to lay, generally you can keep a hive from swarming. But this is essentially what we want to look at. And this is kind of a thing that I do with my students. It's called hive mapping. And there's a link at the end to my link tree, and I have a bunch of these blanks if you guys would like to use these. And essentially what this is it has the boxes with the numbers of frames, and the number is here. If you're only using 8 frames, see this one's for 8 frames, you can darken it in. And then when you're doing your notes in your hive, I just noticed that my students would make books and books and books of notes that never they would ever refer to again. So in my opinion, this is really good. You can look back over and see when you go to inspect your hive, what it looked like last time. So I always make the hive map of after I've moved everything around. So it's like, okay, I had honey, pollen, cat brood, pollen, honey. So if someone brings me a hive map and I see, oh, look, pollen's 3 frames in, that's not good. So I can say, hey, take out frame 2, take that honey out, move pollen to frame 2, and put a blank in frame 3. So I can actually look at someone's hive and know exactly how to help them by seeing their hive maps. But they can also look from frame to frame. Look, last week I had 6 frames of brood, because counting the number of frames of brood in each hive is a very important number. I want to see that number go up. Okay, this week I went in and there was 7 frames of brood or 8 frames of brood. Awesome, the hive is growing in the increased time of year. But what if I went back in there and I had 6 frames of brood last week and this week I've only got 4? Okay, Houston, we have a problem, right? Because the number should keep growing until it backs down slowly during summer solstice. But if it just all of a sudden abruptly cuts back, then I know I've got a problem. So I'm going to pass these around just so you can get an idea. You can use any kind of way you want to write on, but there's blank ones on my link tree for you guys to use. They look like this. And this is what you want this time of year. All right, so here's the manipulations to cap it all off back again. We are looking to, again, these are the things to reduce brood congestion so that we can maintain the peak population of foragers and make a big honey crop. One is we're going to super and add space above the brood nest. This is really important. So when I'm adding a super, I don't just take the super and put it right on top of the brood nest. So the first one you have to, right? So the first super, you look in your top brood box, 7 out of 10 frames have bees on top. Okay, add a super, right? Then after 2 weeks later, I pop the top and I look in my super and 7 of the 10 frames have bees on the top of the super. So with my second super, I never add it to the top. We practice something that's called radical addition of space. Radical addition of space plays on the bee's proclivity to want to fill back into the center. So we under super our second super. We take that super that's empty, instead of sticking it on top with all that honey right over the brood nest, we pop the top and take the super that had all the honey in it, and we put it on top, and we put our empty super below. And we do that every time, because as soon as the cap gets filled with the whatever's closest to the top of the brood nest gets filled with all honey, that's when they want to swarm, or that's when they just quit foraging, because they're like, we have enough honey for ourselves. The only way you have to communicate to your bees is through the gear. So when you pop that top up and you put that blank super in there, you're telling them, hey, you better get back out there, girls. You ain't got enough. And they do. They get back on there and they want to fill the gap between the two. Now, say you have one drawn, let's say you had one super that was drawn and that was the first one you put on. Then you want to add a second super, but you only have naked frames. What you do then is you checker them. So you go back into the one that's all like getting filled up and has comb and all this stuff, and you do one frame drawn, one frame naked, one frame drawn, one frame naked, and you do that throughout both boxes. Then they'll fill all that in, and then you under super your third super. Okay. And you keep doing this under supering action or checkering action, depending on if you have naked frames or drawn frames. And this is how you build them all the way up. And what's so cool about this is the ones that are done the first, and the first ones you put on with the earliest honey is all the way at the top. So when you go to harvest, you just huck the ones off the top, and you know those are done. The ones that may not be kept yet are going to be lower down. So that's really good. And believe me, if you maintain these populations and these brood nests, summer solstice comes around, the blackberry comes in, you don't have to worry about swarming, and it is like magic. I mean, it is so fun. You go out there every week and they need a new super, and you're just like, okay. And it is shocking, like a whole super of naked frames. They can draw it and fill it in a week when the nectar flow is on. And that's the kind of energy you need. They need that forager population to be able to do that. But when you've never seen that, you don't know what they're capable of. And that's what I thought. I didn't know that. I had older queens. When I had 40 hives and I was making 1,500 pounds of honey, I thought I was doing it all, but I was doing excess amount of work than I needed. I was doing all the work and not expecting the bees to do it. Now I'm running good young queens. I've got strong big brood nests, and they're doing tons of supers on one hive instead of one super each on a bunch of hives. And that's what I want y'all to do.
Do you requeen typically in the fall, or do you like to do it in the spring?
I like to do it in the spring before, it kind of depends. If it's an old queen and I start seeing signs, red flags on a queen, always before the third year. So that's straight up, always before the third season. So in the second year, if she's going to do good, she'll usually lay really good for the first couple weeks of spring when you overwinter. But then what happens is when they start really building up and ramping up brood production, she'll start laying excess amounts of drone. And what happens is they all want to lay about 20% worth of drone, but that's a lot, okay? The whole hive worth of brood, 20%, that's an excessive amount normally. But if you start seeing just like the brood nest isn't even that big and there's just walls of drone everywhere, that's a red flag. She's barely even big enough. It's early in the season. She's barely got enough nectar coming in to feed her babies and her brood nest, and she's producing a bunch of drones in the early spring. That's a big red flag that she's turning into a drone layer, because when the queens run out of eggs, they lay drones. So I generally, right then and there, I will either pull her into a nuke and let the hive requeen itself if there's significant amount of drones, not in that hive, but in the environment, or I'll buy a pre-mated queen and I'll requeen the hive that way. So yes. And then essentially, I always want all my queens worked out by summer solstice, because after summer solstice is when that honey stuff needs to happen. And if you take a hit with your population during summer solstice when the blackberry is happening, essentially that will ruin your honey crop right there, because all of a sudden the hive has to go broodless to make a new queen, and you'll never get to that population again. So I want all my queen drama worked out by summer solstice. So I sail into summer solstice with fresh, young, awesome queens. And if I have some old queens here and there that are still doing good, they're showing me how good in resource hives that I'm pulling out frames of cat brood and adding to the other hives to bolster them up. But I'm not setting sail with like betting the farm on those hives. Then, of course, the other big manipulation is to open the brood nest, adding space in the center with drawn or naked frames throughout this period of time. Removing the excess non-brood frames and increasing ventilation. Remember I talked about that? So here's a couple techniques. Opening the screen bottom board. Open the top notch in the inner cover, you know, the little top notch? Flip it and so it's down towards the hive, and so that creates airflow out the top. So open the top notch in the inner cover. Remove entrance reducers. That really creates it. Creep drone brood between boxes scraped and excess burr comb gone. And then crack the top box and the super with a little stick, or you can sometimes push it a little askew. So there's like a little gap there. And it's good because it puts them to guarding that gap, which also takes their energy out of wanting to swarm. And then also lets airflow in that removes that smell from all the excess brood. Oh, yep. And then I'm going to give you guys the copy of these. You guys can share these via link so you can look at these again if you'd like.
Thanks.
I know it's hard, you know, and it's the pictures. They're never good when you go back. I do that all the time. Okay, so when supering, so here's one of my hives. Look at this. This is so early in the spring too to see all that. 3 supers on, and this is all during maple time. So, I mean, when you've got 3 supers on, now I will tell you I'm not sitting this pretty this year because I culled 50% of my brood comb because I was like taking these brood disease class and realizing I had some really old comb I was going on. So I'm in a body regeneration mode and I may not get as much maple. I have about half maybe 10 of the hives have supers on and 10 don't. But again, this is like the sort of like creme de la creme of all the beekeepers is to get that early spring honey and get those supers on early. And then again, don't use a queen excluder and don't forget to remove all supers by the first week of August. Don't forget about Robin hooding. Look at Robin just stirring his little honey pot. He's so stoked. Again, this is such an important thing in beekeeping. And just remember, cat brood is a major resource, but if you give open brood to a weak hive, that takes resources. So that's not going to help anybody to give a bunch of open brood. That's more mouths to feed. Where for every 1 frame of cat brood, that's going to hatch into 3 frames of adult bees. So that's a huge come up for a hive that's kind of doesn't even have to be weak, just smaller. I've been building up my nukes all week and I'm like cracking up because these little nukes are just like every week I go in there, I take a little cat brood off these big hives and put it on them. And I come back a week later and they're just like, hello, we're twice as big. And it's just like, oh yeah, you guys love this. Okay, honey-bound hives. Now this is a really big thing. So this starts to happen as part of this process because they are kind of fighting against you in the beginning. And one of the things that happens is you'll start to see this sunset pattern. Now, the sunset pattern is wonderful to see after summer solstice, but prior to summer solstice, this is not good because what you're seeing will actually prior to August 1st or after August 1st, when you pull your supers off, this is what you want to see. This is what you want them to do once you pull off your supers off. But if they do this when you have your supers on, guess where all the honey's going to go? Down there. It's not going to go in your breed. I've had people seen this in hives. The whole top box looks like this, and there's not a single drop of honey in their supers on top. So you have to change this. Now, when you start to see this, there's a couple manipulations you can do, but you have to take action quick. Pop the top. So what you do is, if this is where the magic of using all mediums comes into play. If you're using all mediums, you're super stoked because all you have to do is take the frames that have honey and you just stick them up in the top and then you put and the empties down below. So now it's more honey in your supers. It's really easy if you're using all mediums because all the frames are the same size. But if you have 2 deeps and you have this situation, then you're kind of screwed because you have to make a deep, a super, essentially, is what has to happen. Now, generally, what I can do is I can do this on one hive. I don't have to do it on all the hives. So I'll take it on one hive, and they might have, it's mostly usually cap brood, but if it's a little open brood, it doesn't matter, because what happens is if they don't, once you have it up in the super, they let it finish out and then they backfill it with honey. So it doesn't really matter, but essentially you have to pull it up, because if you have it down in the brood nest, it's over. But if you pull it up, then it's just part of the super, and that's fine. So I make a deepa super. I go to all the hives that have frames like this, and I pull those out, shake off all the bees, and I stick them in that deep that's a super on one hive. So I'm not lifting 80 pounds on all the hives, just one of the hives, okay? Does that make sense? And then you're solved your honeybound problem. You can also, if you just catch it early and there's just like the center 3 are like that, you can just stick them all the way to the outskirts, put them in positions 1 and 10 or 1 and 8, or at the worst, 2 and 9, and get them out of the way and put empties in the middle. So you've essentially kind of, instead of them capping it like this, you've pushed it to the side so it can still go up like this. Because even though you don't realize it, the colony is a ball in a box, and they're holding that together, and that is happening. And the minute that is not observed, essentially, that creates a problem with them. So when she sees that top, that's the end of the nest. But when you pull it up, then that end of the nest is way up here instead of down here. So that's what you want to do. And just a little correction here to everybody, please pick a brood nest that is going to work with your situation here. If you have a mixed brood nest, which means you're using a deep and mediums, you're putting yourself in a position where the frames can't be interchanged. So these manipulations I'm telling you about can't be made because you can't move the different frames to the different boxes and move them around. So you got to kind of pick a lane, either 3 mediums or double deeps, but don't mix, because that puts you in a position where you don't have a lot of movement you can make. And just some quick configuration specific advice for the double deeps. If you start to get a honey bound, move them, but then also make the super deeps. I already told you that, I don't need to go over that. I think I put these slides in the direction, but that's okay. And then all mediums, again, just take that excess nectar and pollen and make it a 4th box, make it a super. And then again, if you're afraid of swarming and the weather is warm, you can actually do radical addition of space in the brood nest. You can stick an entire super of drawn comb between 2 boxes of drawn comb. So say you have 2 mediums like this and they're both full of drawn comb. If it's warm and the nights are warm, you can take an entire box of all drawn comb and stick it between those 2 pieces, and you won't chill the brood. That's just only during the later part of the season once it's warmer and they're all cap brood, but that works with all mediums. And then when you do consolidate down at the end of the season, it's okay to go down to 2 mediums to overwinter, 1 box of honey and 1 box of brood. Oftentimes there's a 2nd box of honey, so there's 2 boxes of honey and 1 box of brood. They don't need all that. They only need 1 frame of honey to 1 frame of brood. So it's okay to take that excess box of honey and give them just the 2 boxes to overwinter. I generally, I have about half my hives in all mediums, and I generally take them down to 2 during winter. And then don't forget planting your honey. It doesn't matter how big your yard is, even if you just have containers. If you can provide nectar, even just a little sprinkle of the cover crops underneath your pots and your deck and all that stuff, you are really giving them some great nutrition and some great honey. Some of my favorite, of course, are fruit trees because they produce a lot of nectar for a small amount of area. Medicinal herbs, they take very little work and they give a lot of bang for their buck. Borage, licorice mint has known to drop more honey than any other medicinal herb. It's like within seconds it fills its nectary, and there's like all different species and colors. Lavender, California poppy, elderberry, serviceberry, hawthorn, osoberry, which blooms really early, which is good. Cover crops, this is my crimson clover. This is when before we planted the orchard, we did a couple seasons of cover cropping. And that is the clover, but we now grow lots of Lacey Facilia, meadow foam, sweet pea, vetch, and mustard. And then when you're growing vegetables, let your veggies bolt. Let them flower after you're done. There's no reason to hack them all down. Let them bolt. They love radish. And take that nectar path with me. If you're interested in learning more and wanting to learn from me, go to my link tree and there's a bunch of resources on there. There is my queen rearing guide on there, my wheel of the years. So the wheel of the year that I showed you is the sort of overall seasonal wheel of the year, but I also do a wheel of the year where we record the flowering plants for each month in our area to get an idea about what's blooming when. If you're not aware of that, you're kind of shooting in the dark each season because you're not really able to prepare for your hives for what nectar is available. And I've really noticed, like, I have a client that lives where they lined the street back in the, early turn of the century with red maples, and they bloom extremely early. So her hives swarm every year, like right at spring equinox when nobody else's hives swarm for another month, because she has this resource right there at her doorstep. And that can change your whole situation, having a resource right at your doorstep. So be aware of what resources you have. And that's it. Sorry, I don't know, Brian, if it was that much more brief, but I tried. I was moving fast. I was clipping. I usually take a long time. So, does anyone have any questions? Katie?
I do. Doing a one-to-one syrup and an internal feeder. Where do you put your internal feeder?
I'm a big fan of top feeders. So I like to do the inner cover, the keyhole in the inner cover. They have the round top feeders that I get them on the place that we shall not name that begins with an A and has free shipping. And they're really good and cheap. And I get them for every one of my hives. And they have a cup inside and it keeps the bees from drowning. And then you just don't have to open the hive. You just can keep it tanked on the top. But it's not so much. And what I've learned is those big old ginormous feeders, 1-to-1 turns to alcohol in like 4 days. So you really don't want to put a ton of 1-to-1 on something because they're not going to eat it quick enough to have it not go bad. So I like to do what we call cluster feeding, which is you feed it, you let them run dry. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to give you a quart a week or 2 quarts a week, but I don't give them more than that. So I let them run dry, then come back the next week and let them run dry. So those are my favorite. And then the cool thing about those feeders is in the winter, you can pop the cup out and put your dry sugar in there and they can come up through there. If you have your foamular board and you practice Dewey's ingenious condensing hive method, the top box can be totally warm enough for them to be able to come in and get that sugar easily without having any problem. And it doesn't create excess condensation from the air gap. So that's one of the other reasons I really like that method.
Yeah, you talked about when you're honey bound, pulling the honey and the pollen out. What do you do with it?
So when you pull the excess honey and pollen, there's 2 things that you can do. One is you can put it into a super. So if you have all mediums, you put it into a super and let them finish it off like that. Or you could make a deepa super, or you could pull it out and freeze it or give it to other hives like nukes or swarms or whatever. So sometimes you freeze it. Sometimes, honestly, I'm too busy to do any of those things. And I just pull those frames out and lay them on the bench and let them open feed. Because I don't care as long as it's not in the brood boxes, right? So they're going to pick it up again and they're going to have to deposit where I want them to instead of down in the brood boxes.
What about the pollen though? Do they take the pollen?
They don't take the pollen. So that's why I was saying once they do the pollen, it's just like, sorry, I've got so many excess frames of pollen and it's terrible because they mold and they get all nasty and it's just a big bummer. So that's why pollen kind of ruins it. So I have a friend who puts the pollen traps on and I'm telling you, you should see how much I go through his hives with him. His hives still are pollen packing and he's pulling off gallons and gallons. He's already got like 3 5-gallon buckets from the pollen trap, which we just are, it's an untapped resource that we don't do here that we should be because of where we live. So that's another possibility is to put a pollen trap on to slow the amount of pollen they bring in. Is that it?
Oh, no. So you had talked about, keeping the ventilation open so the queen smell can go around. It seems like there's some people that really are into closing up the hives and not having only very little vent, in other words, anti-vent.
That I'm right along with them, and I practice Dewey's method of condensing hives, which means I don't use upper entrances during winter or anything, but this is different. This is during the springtime, and any hive that's got a chock-a-block full of that much brood is strong as hell, and there is no way that any amount of venting is going to harm them, or yellow jackets are going to get them, or robber bees are going to get in. They are strong when they look like that. So that those fears are not like in that context, I guess. The context in which venting is a problem is in winter, when you want the you don't want to lose all your heat and your pheromone envelope, and the condensation is going to draw out and rain down on your bees. And then as well as during robbing season, when a weaker hive that's not very strong could be inundated with yellow jackets or robber bees.
So the temperature fluctuations between day and night are not any.
No, they have so much heat in these hives. Have you ever done that like this time of year? If you open up a hive, I mean, my second grader said it this morning. We opened up the hive and the whole top of our older queen from last year. It's so hot. He's like, the heat hit me in the face. The one little 2-year-old and the second grader said, because it does. The heat from all that cat brood will hit you in the face. It is so hot in there. And it's that heat that when it's all cloistered in there and all that cat brood and that heat, that lack of airflow, that creates the bottleneck of swarming instinct.
Now you talked about pulling out the sticking board. I use that to monitor mites, but you're saying that I can just leave it out until.
Yeah, leave it out, and you can just put it in for the 24 or 48-hour period to monitor your mites at intervals that you want to do that. So you can still monitor, but don't leave it in during that swarming time. And Dewey did some great stuff back in his day about, I don't know how long ago this was done, but they did a lot of studies on the bottom board of the screen bottom board and leaving the mite board in versus leaving it out in the winter. And there's not a big difference, is there? No. So even in the winter, I've left them out all winter and had no problems. So it doesn't make the way that they're like a little swamp cooler. They're pushing air down and out constantly. So not a lot is coming up in that way. That it?
So, do you ever think about taking the filled boxes supers off early, or do you keep them because they haven't?
No, I will and I have a student who she's a elder woman. She has a bad back and she has been my student for 4 years. She follows all my rules. In fact, her problem now is she's like, I don't need this much honey anymore. But what she does is when the boxes get done, so when that third one goes on, she pulls the top one off and sticks the second one in. So there's only ever 2 on at a time. So as they cap them, you can totally pull them off. It doesn't have to stay on. I'm just, because I have 3 yards and I'm going around 3 different yards, it's easier for me to leave them off and harvest all at once. All right, I stunned them to silence. We're good.
Will you make a new post?
Okay.
And we'll get Dewey's program up.
Okay, let me see my little participants here. Where is you? Oh, there it is. Okay. I'm leaving. Cool. So thanks to Dewey. It's a lifelong dream. I've got bee culture magazines from the very inception, from the 30s and 40s and all the way back. That's my side gig, is I collect vintage paper, and I'm gonna be up here with my booth of vintage paper June 16th at the Portland Book and Paper Fair. So if you guys come by, you can see all my other weird hobbies and nerd stuff I do.
Sure, you love that booth at the beekeeping conference in
Yeah.
Alabama. It was like the garden sale.
So yeah, that was like, oh yeah, I got so much from there. I had to check a bag because I got so many books. I got some of Dewey's original books from back in the day. It was like from the 60s something. It was like, I forgot to bring them. I want you to sign them.
I'm gonna visit with you later.
Oh, good.
Okay, Dewey, you're up.
Did everyone get a chance to see it? They got the row here? Okay, very good. Good, all right. Okay, I've been bugging you for 2 months to please supply some information on what happened overwintering. So now for the very first time, the survey closed on Friday. We cleaned it up over the weekend, and this is the first time anyone has seen any of the results. So the club is the sponsor. So anyone recognize that fellow? That's it. That's the 70s, back in the 70s. And I'm going to Maryland next month to celebrate. So I started a bunch of clubs there. All right. So for the very first time, this is our Oregon results for this past year. Overall for the state, 422 returns, 24%. But notice next one where we are here for Portland Urban did better. And that's happened now the last couple of years. Most of the early years, this club had the heaviest levels of losses. So now you're leading the pack on up here. 57 returns. Thank you for that very much. Next one.
Oh, we did.
I just circle that one as well. Okay, for hive type, I asked you by the type of hive that you had. So this is a comparison with the state, and the lighter color is pub. So for laying 8, there were 60 fall colonies, lost 17%. For laying 10s, 196 fall colonies for the group, lost about the same as the state level. You can see 22. There were only 8 nukes for this group, and 5 of them survived, 3 did not. Top bar, 13 in the fall, and had very good survival. Of this number, I think that represents 1 that did not survive of the 13. None of the wary, there were 3 of them, none of them died, so great survival. And this is 1 of 2, which you can see for other hive types. No, they were all longitudinal hives. So, instead of vertical, on a horizontal. Next. I asked by hive origination. Now, this is a part of the fast track, so you don't have to answer this. And most of you did not. In fact, most of the state did not as well, over 50%. But for those that did, overwintering 45, you can see about the same as the state. The one person that had the package originated colony lost that one. There were 2 nukes, both of them did not survive. That's unusual. As you can see, nukes are usually every year around 50%. Great job with swarms, 44 of them that were reported by those that did report. Not everyone necessarily did. Those that did splits, great job. So those would be certainly our way that we would think in terms of originating a colony or starting a colony, because year after year after year, swarms and splits do very well. There were 3 pharaohs and only 2 of the 3 survived.
Is a pharaoh like a log hive where you leave them in place?
No,
or what's
it's mostly transfers of colonies from some other source. So it was a cutout, like a cutout transfer. Yes, thank you. Interesting. Look at this. What's happening? The green are us, the smaller scale. This is the trend line. The red is our commercials of the state. Usually we get about 50% of the colonies. This is a preliminary number, but look at the trend line. They've come together. At one time, it was about double the loss. We were suffering double the loss of our large scale. So we're doing something right with our clubs. Obviously, we're doing much better off. I think as well there. So you'll get a written report. Jessica's gonna let you know when that occurs. We do post it on the website. And so I've got a lot more information. I got more information. I will not initially get to what you did for manipulations, chemicals used, non-chemical use, screen bottom boards, et cetera. I'm going to go through all the losses for the various clubs. You can see with 422, I got a much bigger database to have to work with this year, which is great news and bad news. You have to go through it. So, but I'll get that. So I'll initially post this part of it. And the way that I'm working through it, I'm very hopeful that you might see something next week as a report for the club. Thank you so much. I was bugging you for the last 2 months. Now here's a reward. Thank you for your service.
I'll note that when I came on the board, as maybe 8 years ago, on our Facebook page, there's like an admin section where it describes the club. It talked about us being a treatment-free, like that we advocated treatment-free for mites and things like that. So it does seem like just even as a club, and there's been a lot of changes over the years, and I wonder if that is mite related and treatment is much more common. And I don't know what anyone thinks.
I hope we don't hit you too much over the head with treatments, but it can make a difference.
Yeah.
Timely, everything is timely with these.
Yeah. Anybody have any questions or things they want to talk about? All right. See you next month.